Hey guys, and welcome back to I Will Go Down with This Ship. My name is Heather.
And I'm Chelsea.
Chelsea is clearly a little preoccupied right now, probably going over her notes.
Yes.
And so we are going to be discussing episode 5 of Fallout. Before we did, I think that there are a couple of things that we want to go over. Number one, the Oilers did not win the Stanley Cup. They came back from a 3-0 game or a 3-0 series, and they were really close. But the Oilers did re-sign Corey Perry, so he has another chance. So I'm excited about that. So silver linings. Secondly, I know in one of the episodes, I keep forgetting which one, I have discussed Justified, and I am potentially pulling back on that recommendation while I'm getting through season 5. It's still a really good show. Walton Goggins is so amazing. Timothy Oliphant is so amazing, but I'm not liking how my ship is turning out, which actually is par for the course as a crack shipper. But I guess we'll see. We will see, and I'm sure we'll see how this ages. Let's just say that. Anyway, Chelsea, how is your writing? Let's do a writing update.
Oh gosh. So I got Monday's episode of Deceit and Desire turned in at like 3 a.m., but it actually went live on Monday, so it was fine.
That's great.
It can take up to 72 hours to go live, so I was like, "Woo, Lord, let it let it go live." But it did. It went live on Monday. It was fine. I have not yet written tomorrow's episode, so like winging a prayer as usual. Like
You'll get it. You'll do
I,
this. You
I will.
you will. Um, and so do you want to discuss just really quick, like what part are you on? Like what's going on in the story right now? Well,
Okay.
what are the tropes? Let's because I don't know if we touched on this, but
I don't think we have touched on this, but we will run down the tropes real fast. Well, we'll hit on genre too.
yeah,
It is a cowboy romantic suspense.
like
Uh,
basically if you love Beth and Rip, you're gonna love this story.
yes, because it was heavily inspired by Beth and Rip and also by the trip that my husband and son and I, along with my parents, took out to Yellowstone National Park and Montana and Wyoming last year. That was freaking incredible. I desperately want to go back. But also inspired by the plethora of cowboy movies I grew up watching with my Papa Poochie.
Mhm.
He always had cowboy movies on. Like every time you came in the living room, it was either cowboy movies or war movies. Like
It
that
sounds
was
like
it.
my grandpa.
And I loved watching them with him so much. Like those are some of the best memories of my childhood, and leaning into that nostalgia and that energy and that feeling, I think is part of what's made it so fun for me to
Yeah.
write this book. And
So blue collar alpha male is what you're saying.
yes, very much so. Like my hero is very heavily Rip inspired. I will say that. But did not have a good relationship with his mother in the way that Rip did.
Yeah.
Um, and my heroine is pretty heavily inspired by Beth, but there's a bit of a different spin there.
Yes,
And,
there is.
the relationship with her mother was much closer and less contentious. So the loss of her mother hit her in a different way.
Yeah, for sure.
And so tropes, uh, and it
Basically all of them. Enemies to lovers, second chance, um, alpha male, possessive. I feel like possessive is a trope. Cowboy,
right, and capable female
fake.
protagonist also.
Yes.
She's a businesswoman.
Fake
Engaged.
dating. Yeah,
um Marriage of convenience,
I love that.
actually. uh but
He
there are,
falls first, right? I would
yes,
say he falls
he
first.
he definitely fell first and fell harder, and like the it's complicated.
Yeah.
there are there are real feelings on both sides, but Zoe's mom dying when she was 8 years old, like she has been pushing everybody away ever since then because she never wants to feel that kind of loss again.
Yeah.
And so, like, even though she cares, she's just been like running away or holding people at arm's length ever since then because she doesn't want to go through that kind of trauma again.
No, that and what I love about your writing and what I would encourage any listeners who either want to write their own stuff or even fanfic is really explore who your characters are and what has shaped that. Like when you're starting your story or your fic or whatever, what has shaped them up to this point? Because I was gonna say Riff. I was like, Roman and Zoe like the back of your hand. You can tell anyone who asks what their wound is, why they are behaving, what their character motivation is. And I feel like as writers, that is the most important job for us because if you go to a writer and as a reader or a viewer and you're like, well, why did this person do this? It doesn't make sense based on what you have, laid the foundation for. If you can't respond or you can't, if you don't know, then you're not doing your job. Everything is a cause and effect in writing. It has to follow the sequential logical understanding of who your characters are. And I feel like your characters are so rich and they jump off the page that it's just like it's really a joy to read. And for me, I learn a lot reading your stuff. So,
You
thanks for
they are
sharing. Yeah.
they're very real people to me
Yeah.
in my head. They speak to me, they feel very real to me, and like they are whole human beings. They are flawed. They feel very real and like they're complex. And even when it seems like what they're doing doesn't make sense, there's always a reason for it. And you're gonna see that reason at some point.
Yep.
And there's gonna be revelations. And I'm in chapter 11 right now, but I have almost 30,000 words already at chapter 11. Like
That's
she gonna
crazy.
be thick.
Yeah.
It's but it's such a good romantic suspense also because like it's not just about their second chance romance. It's also about her dead best friend,
Right.
Miss. And everyone thought that Missy had committed suicide, but the former sheriff has just passed away within the last few months and has made a deathbed confession that Zoe's father pressured him into withholding evidence that actually pointed to murder. And Missy's brother knows this and has pushed the new sheriff into reopening the investigation. And Missy's brother Michael has always been convinced that either Zoe or Roman or both of them had something to do with Missy's death.
Well,
And
because Roman and Missy were trying to fuck with Zoe because I mean it's very complicated and you'll get the details if you read the story, but there's a lot of complex relationships going on. And even if we get mad at Michael for pushing this, we understand why he's pushing this. And this is what I think draws us into complex antagonists. Someone like potentially Max, if he does turn into that way. And we're probably going to talk a lot about it because this is a Max episode. I don't even think it's a Lucy episode. It's a very Max centered episode. And I think that your characters and your world are so rich. And the complexity of it and understanding it. And I think that that's the important part is that we, even if we don't agree with everybody's choices or motivations, we understand, okay, that sucks, but I get why he is the way that he is or why she's doing this.
exactly. And that's one thing that my mom has said to me is that like every single person in this story has done something wrong, but like you can't fully be mad at any of them because you get where everybody's coming from.
And that's another important point that you make, is that your characters should be flawed. They shouldn't be perfect. Like even Lucy, to a degree, her ignorance is her biggest flaw. And what we're going to talk about today is almost like, I don't want to say she has this superiority, but like she feels like she knows more about history and the world and stuff like that. And that is also like a big flaw, despite her, otherwise, she's someone you could probably get along with. But yeah, I love the fact that every single one of your characters, like your mom said, they aren't perfect. They make poor choices, but you understand the choice and you understand why they're making the choice, even again, if you don't agree with it. And I love that it's not just the antagonists who are doing this. It's Roman, it's Zoe, it's everybody,
Right. Even Zoe's dad.
Yeah.
And like Zoe, Missy, Michael, Cody, everybody.
Yeah. So what are your goals this week for your writing?
I'm keeping it on the low end because I have work stuff on my plate also, writing wise. But I'm going to today get Wednesday's episode done and uploaded. And then Friday's episode, both are gonna be around 600 word episodes, but that'll get me 3/4 of the way through chapter 11.
Yep.
And we are at the point where Zoe and Roman have both just realized that Missy was keeping secrets from both of them, and that those secrets are what potentially got her killed.
It's kind of reminds me, like if this was set in high school, I feel like this would be so Veronica Mars. Like, you know what I mean? But like Veronica Mars, but like the Midwest with cowboys and shit. Like not California, it's Montana. Like that would be actually really cool. Okay, perfect. And how is the writing itself coming? Is it kind of flowing? Are you kind of facing a little bit of writer's block, or how are you doing in terms of that?
It's slow going right now because I just switched back points of view again. And because I have so many other things on my plate, like I just did a big developmental edit, or a big chunk of a developmental edit in the space of like 3 days for a client, because her book was so compelling and so good and made me ugly cry, by the way, but like in the best way possible.
Yeah.
It's fantastic. But when I have such emotional overwhelm, almost like it takes me longer
That makes sense.
be productive writing wise. And then also, I had I did it at Alice going down the rabbit hole productivity moment last night with our merch, and got like 3 hours of sleep. So I'm sure the writing's going to be slow tonight for tomorrow's episode, because I was like so zoned in, and then I looked out the window and I was like, oh shit, the sun is up. Oops.
Speaking of merch, yes, Chelsea has worked her ass off. And we have a merch shop. So if you're ever like, how can I support you guys, if that ever crosses your mind? The link is below. We have really cute shirts. We're gonna get some more. Chelsea designed all of them. Both of us came up with like the different taglines. And if anything sticks out to you guys, leave them in the comments and we'll see if it makes sense to make it a shirt. Because like Chelsea said, once it's getting to be fall, like I'm gonna grab a couple of these hoodies. So and we're excited to share them with you. But Chelsea, before we get into the episode, what if we talked about how good you are with characters. If someone is here right now listening and they want what's some advice you could give about developing your characters or even just understanding your characters' motivations? What would you tell them?
Um, a really honest self-reflection about yourself and like, looking at you as a person, because you know yourself better than you know anybody else in the world. And you can like take and pick yourself apart and be like, okay, what are my strengths? What are my flaws? What makes me tick? If something like this happens, how am I going to react? Like that's a big way in which I figure out how my characters are going to act, because I like pick myself apart and I do really honest self-reflection. But also, One Stop for Writers. I don't know if you guys have ever used that site or referenced it. It is an incredible tool for figuring out character motivations, emotions, the way characters like physically present the emotions. It's put together by, I want to say, Angela Ackerman and Becca Puglisi, that did the
The
emotion
emotion yeah, that's
and
such a good
things like
reference.
that. The website is absolutely freaking incredible. I have the annual subscription to it. It is an incredible character and story building resource, and I highly recommend it. I can occasionally like fall down a neurodivergent rabbit hole of like spending so much time building the characters that I'm not actually being productive, which, like danger, Will Robinson will warn you guys about that.
Yeah.
But it is a really fantastic resource for making sure that the way your characters behave makes sense based on their wound, the lies that they tell themselves based on the wound, and like making sure that their arc makes sense.
Mhm.
It's just an incredible tool. I highly recommend it. We will link it below.
Yeah.
Um, Absolutely fantastic tool. But also just like, I've people watched all my life, and honest self-reflection, but also like watching the people around me and like trying as a neurodivergent person to figure out, why did that person do what they just did? Why are they acting that way? Why are they responding that way? Just like trying to figure out the world around me and make it make sense. Like it
Yeah.
always comes back to make it make sense for me. And just people watching and trying to figure out their motivations
Yeah.
is a big thing for me. And like, I know sometimes I come off so rude because I will just like be staring at people in the grocery store. I'm like, oh my God, why is this weird bitch looking at me? Like, I'm just trying to figure out what makes you tick. Okay, you're gonna end up in a book. It's fine.
That's so funny. I love that. And yeah, I definitely second the emotion thesaurus and just the whole series of books. I played around on the website, definitely. I think it's great. So for me, Boots and Scars, that other one, it's done, it's edited. I'm really excited. Basically, that one is essentially Fallout, but like not in a wasteland, in a college setting with hockey. So like it's super grumpy sunshine, um, enemies to lovers, and let's see what other age gap, naturally. Not 200 years of age gap, just 10, which I think is fine. And then yeah, so that one is good. It's done. It's with ARC readers. People have already read it, and so they seem to really like it.
I have read excerpts, people. It is amazing. And if you love Gulsi, read it. You're going to love it.
It comes out in August. I'm just it like that story was so much fun to write, as frustrating at times as it is, just because the characters would just do whatever the hell they wanted and they were not listening.
So
It really is. And so it's like, for me, it was just so much fun to like play with them and to understand the dynamics of their relationships and what made them tick. And I loved I loved exploring the angst, because I don't typically write a lot of angst, especially like
But I
from the
do.
male. I know you do. You're so good at it too. I feel like I'm very much like sunshine and whatever, or like super possessive. And so like the angst kind of took me a little bit of time, because I'm like, okay, is this gonna come out whiny? Like, is he feeling sorry for himself? Like, but I needed to make it more alpha or more masculine, like not like, okay, come on, Cooper, don't be a little bitch here, you know? And yes, his name is Cooper. I'm very on the nose with a lot of my character names. It's like my homage, like my way to say thank you to my muses or the inspiration or whatever. And to anyone who knows, it's like a kind of like Easter egg, like, huh, did you catch that? Did you catch that? But anyway, so I'm glad, that's fun. So I'm writing right now, I'm writing the next book in the series, and it's let's see. It's a little bit more slow going. I'm starting to I understand the characters a little bit, as I feel like with these two, because they've been in the books up to now. So I know you've read a couple of the books. It's Henry and Freya's book. And
Okay.
so um it's gonna have like secret society in it, where
Ooh.
you have the arranged marriage, like, and it's very enemies to lovers, because she does not want to marry him, but he's very much like, no, this is what happens, we have to follow. He's like the rule follower kind of, but like not, how should I say it, he's not like, he doesn't have like, the reason he's such a rule follower is because his grandfather meant so much to him, and his grandfather arranged this. And so out of respect to his grandfather, it's not so much of like, I have to do it because I was told to do it. It's more of like this honoring something, you know? But yeah, and so she's the only child whose parents never pay attention to her. And so like he's like using this against her, like, is this some kind of cry of attention because nobody loves you? He's an asshole, and she's kind of a bitch. And so I guess we'll see what happens. I have no idea. I'm just going along for this. Like,
I cannot wait. And like, can I just say that I love it when I get messages from you because your characters are not behaving? Like, those are my favorite messages to get. And also my favorite messages to send you. Like, I rage at the
yeah,
time, but also I enjoy sending those messages.
they're the best. And so, like, if you're ever writing, and because I get this a lot with my clients of like, you know, if we do an outline together, or if we do a consultation and we talk through a plot, and they'll come to me like a couple weeks later, and they almost feel bad, like, I didn't actually follow the outline. I'm like, good, don't follow the outline. You have to do what your characters tell you to do. Sometimes you need that outline to start, and they're going to just take it from there, and you have to go with what they're telling you to do. Don't be JK Rowling and like forcing Ron and Hermione to get together, because that is what the outline told her to do, and she committed to it. And at the very, very least, she should have gotten Harry and Hermione together. I mean, I obviously wanted her to get with Snape, but clearly that doesn't happen. I would have settled for Draco and Hermione, you know, which
Yes.
made way more sense. So just top tip, don't listen to the outline if it doesn't feel right. It's okay to deviate from the outline. The end. So
Right. And like, your characters, this is going to sound absolutely insane, but like, your characters have access to things in your subconscious that you may not have access to. Listen to them. Like,
100%.
they can voice your gut instinct for you, and they know what they're doing.
Yeah, you got
Listen.
to trust them, and trust yourself too. Like, even if you're just starting out, like, I think this is why fanfic is so great just to start out with, because you already have these characters and this world, and now you're just playing with stuff that's already laid out. But I also think that it can be even harder sometimes, because you have to fall within these parameters, but just have fun and play around. And you will start, the more that you write, the better that you get at it, just like mostly every other skill. And it's so much fun. And just I always think, if I'm surprised by something, my readers are going to be surprised by something. And so, like, just let them take you on this journey. Um, so I think for this week, what chapter am I on? I think I want to finish up to chapter 12 by the end of the week and then just go from there. I'm doing like a chapter a day and just kind of really trying to like get these characters. And yeah, but that's my writing goal for them, for myself for this week. And obviously, reading whatever you send me this week. But I think having said that, should we jump into the episode?
Yes.
Okay, why don't you go ahead and start?
Okay. So I'm just gonna dive in with like the biggest revelation that hit me when I was doing my rewatch on this
Do
episode.
it.
I might be entirely and completely wrong about this, but like I was rewatching today right before we started filming, and I I texted Heather and I was like, bruh, what if Betty was the one who rat poisoned the prisoners to push people into panicking and voting for her for overseer? And like that had not occurred to me before today. You know, I was playing around with several other options like Norm or Steph or whatever, but like it just kind of hit me like it totally could have been Betty, despite the way that she pontificates and presents herself, you know, as like the perfect pillar of society and the way that people should be. Like, I feel like with the way that she cleaned up all the shit in Vault 32, the way she did so quickly, that Betty definitely has a dark side. And she could have rat poisoned those people easily to push the residents of Vault 33 into freaking out and wanting to panic for someone reliable from Vault 31, you know, and they have that saying, when things look glum, vote 30.
Vote 31, yeah. And I also think too, we have to remember that Betty, and granted, we don't know this obviously until we finish episode 8, but Betty is pre-war. So what I found really interesting, and it didn't really hit me until I was doing the rewatch of this episode too, is that Vault-Tec used the fear of communism as a way to sort of get people to be on their side of like, you know, everything. Like Cooper went to war fighting communists, right? And he starts talking to, and we'll see this in the flashbacks. He starts talking to Moldaver at communism, what like pro-communist sort of like meetings, right? Like where it's, and so it's funny because the vaults from Vault-Tec are actually very communistic, if you will, because everyone gets equal resources. We're not gonna fight. Everyone, you know, is equal. But Betty, I feel, is pre-war. So she comes from this capitalistic thing of, okay, we're gonna do what we need to do in order to, you know, get shit done. And I think that I mean, I don't remember. I know that she was Cooper's wife's secretary. I don't know in terms of hierarchy where Hank falls and Betty fall, because Hank was getting dry cleaning for Barb too. And so it might have really pissed her off that Hank was voted as overseer, unless it was specific to like it was planned that way. But maybe this is Betty's way of ensuring that she gets power that she might not have ever had before, especially as a secretary. What?
She's been overseer once before, at least.
Oh, that's right. That's right. I totally forgot about that. What made her step down again? Do we know? I don't remember.
I don't remember. Good grief. Oh, the sinus infection is gonna kill me. But she has been overseer once before, and like I feel like she and Hank are thick as thieves for sure, because of the whole exchange that she has with Norm about,
yes,
I buried your mother myself, me and your father. Like,
that went over my head the first time. Like I thought, I knew she was lying, but I just thought, oh, she's coming up with some bullshit. But I'm like, no, she fucking knew that what Rose did, and she knew what Hank did, and she didn't do anything to stop it. Like, and technically speaking, she wasn't lying. Like she wasn't telling Norm specifics, but I don't think she's lying at all. I think she and Hank blew up Shady Sands. Now, why Betty would go along with that, I'm very curious as to why. Yeah. So I just want to shout out to Thaddeus. Like we get to open with him this episode. It's so awesome. And what's interesting is that Max brands him. And it's like they're just a couple of bros, like all excited that they have the head. And Thaddeus is all like, no, dude, you should brand me. And he's like, Max is like, oh, are you sure? Like, like
Warning, like it really hurts.
yeah. And so like he does. And then Max, it's so interesting because again, it's like Max, you think Max is doing something good. He tells Thaddeus the truth. He's like, there's something I need to tell you. But what's interesting and what really, really needs to be pointed out is he doesn't tell him anything until after the brand. And branding is essentially commitment, right? Which is interesting because Cooper basically brands Lucy and Lucy brands Cooper by biting their fingers off and exchanging them. And that's basically, anyway, we won't get into that right now. But it's interesting because he's all like, oh, no. Like he doesn't say anything until after Thaddeus is branded. And then he's like, but we need to get our story straight. And so it feels like he only is honest because now that they're back on the way, they've succeeded in this mission, they've gotten the head. Now Max needs Thaddeus on his side. They need to get their story straight, but don't worry, we can still be friends. And it's like, it's a very selfish way to have done that because what is Thaddeus getting out of this exchange? He's getting nothing. And it was very, like, again, things go over your head and then you realize, like, wait a second, like, what Max did, you think, oh, he's finally being honest. But no, he's only being honest because he knows that he's going to get caught when they get to the Brotherhood. And he needs Thaddeus on his side, or else he's gonna, if not get killed, get severely punished. Yep. So I thought that was, again, a really interesting thing. And I do want to mention, because and we kind of touched on it before we dove into the episode, we start with Max's point of view. I feel like this is a complete Max episode. This is why we don't see Cooper Howard in this episode, unfortunately. RIP. Like, what would you say?
A war crime.
Yeah.
It violates the Geneva Convention to not have Cooper Howard in this episode.
And before you guys come at us about like, oh, well, didn't you say episode 4 that Max isn't as important? And it's like, okay, Max is important, but the difference is episode 4 was a Cooper Lucy episode. They both learned something from each other. I felt like it was very equally drawn. This episode is specific to Max. I feel like if we have an antagonistic point of view in a book, this is that point of view chapter, if you will, because even when you have, and we'll get into this after we discuss it, when Lucy comes to save Max, we're not seeing it from Lucy's perspective. We don't see Lucy come upon Max. We see it from literally Max's perspective of they're rad roaches, right? Are those the rad roaches coming at him? And all of a sudden Lucy saves his life. And so Chelsea, what happens after Max makes that proposition to Thaddeus? How does Thaddeus respond?
Thaddeus is pissed and like hurt that he has been deceived, he's been lied to, he has been branded, and like all under false pretenses. And understandably, like he takes the head and leaves.
No, wait, what happens? Does Max try anything? What happens? Max tries to kill him, right? Yeah. And it's so funny because Thaddeus basically does the same thing that fucking Cooper did. And it shows like in Philly, like he dismantles the machine in some way. And so for me, that's Max isn't learning his lessons and he's very arrogant, all because he thinks he has this armor, but he doesn't even know how to use his own armor, where people below him, a ghoul and a squire, are getting they're
getting
like
the best of him.
exactly. And so
Like that was so smart of Thaddeus though to just like take the fusion core
It's
and
quick. Like he
disable the
was quick. I was like, damn, Thaddeus. Yeah, but I was like,
I
I was like,
felt so bad for him getting his foot crushed too.
oh,
Like
I
that was
know.
so like, oh, poor baby.
Well, and even Thaddeus, like Max is like, I'm gonna kill you, and Thaddeus is like, well, you should have. And it's like, he was trying to. I just think Thaddeus got the better of him, and like, you would hope that Max is getting humbled by constantly getting his ass kicked. Like, just because you're part of the Brotherhood, just because you're literally this knight, it doesn't actually mean anything. The armor is meaningless if you don't know how to do it. And again, that goes back to Walton Goggins. The swagger makes the man. And right now, Max doesn't have a lot of that swagger. Like, he's very ignorant, almost in a way, the same way that kind of Lucy is. And we see her when she comes, she's not really learning the lessons that Cooper was giving her either in terms of like the wasteland. And it's very interesting because I feel like when she was with Cooper, she was more curious. And I feel like when she's with Max, she's like, I think after her experience with Cooper, she feels like she has to be right. Like there has to be good. We can't default to this mistrust in people, or else what is the world coming to? But what I did love is that Lucy saves Cooper. Lucy saves Max, but doesn't automatically free him from the armor. Like,
Right. She doesn't automatically trust him either.
yeah. And that's what I was like, okay, you are learning, a little bit. And I feel like when Lucy is like killing the rad roaches, I'm like, oh, are you taking some of that pent up anger you had at Cooper out on these rad roaches?
Right. With the stomping, that was so cute.
Can you imagine? Oh gosh, if they fight and then things get heated and they have like angry sex. Oh my gosh, someone needs to write a fanfic of that. Like, I would love that. But like she's like, I want to trust you, I want to trust you, but I haven't had the best week or whatever she tells him. But then again, and I love this, she starts throwing up, and this is cause and effect. So the water that she so desperately drank, her eating the pomegranate seed has now affected her, where she is now throwing up, and she is forced to help Max because he has medicine that will help her. And this is genius writing. Like, it's like setups and payoffs completely. Like, nothing is done just for the fun of it. And this is tightly plotted. I love it. And this is how you know the writing is good, is because of shit like this. And everything was set up perfectly. And I loved that.
Well, and I love that even though we are suffering through no Cooper Howard in this episode, you are still seeing the after effects of Cooper throughout this episode.
Oh, entirely. Like, I feel Lucy as a character in this episode is a direct response from her time with Cooper. Like, because she's not the same Lucy before him. And obviously she wouldn't be the same Lucy, but it's almost like there's this chip on her shoulder, like she has to prove Cooper wrong. And but then you have his voice in her head, I guarantee it. Like, and that's why she's not trusting Max. And like, it's interesting because when Lucy's trying to negotiate, like she's trying to make this deal, like, okay, I know, again, Max makes up some bullshit lie about, well, I need to go do this. He's not telling her that he needs to get the head, even though she just says, hey, I need this head. And Lucy basically figures it out, but she kind of lets that little thing slide. She's like, okay, well, I know that you're going after this head, so let's go find it. We'll take it back to the Brotherhood, and you give me some of your armor so we can go help my dad. And Max doesn't agree. He just kind of like looks at her. And I just thought that was like really, really interesting. And I love again that difference of, and we've talked about it with our interviews already, but like Cooper isn't going to bullshit you. you know, you don't like who he is and what he does, and that's perfectly fine, but he's not gonna
What you see
lie.
is what you get.
Exactly. So you know what to expect, and he's not gonna lie to you, at least for right now. Whereas Max is constantly lying. He lied to her about his name. He literally has the opportunity to tell her even just a simple truth of my name is Max. But the way that he views Lucy is I need to impress this girl, because even she's like, "Oh, are you the one from Philly?" And I feel like he has to put on this role of I'm in my armor, I'm the tough guy, I have to protect this innocent little, naive girl. So my name is Titus. And it's disappointing because Lucy doesn't give a shit about stuff like that. Um, but yeah, so, she's forced to kind of, help Max. And then, what's interesting, so like I loved this part too, is when she's checking out the armor herself, she's talking about the Battle of Anchorage. And again, we have that little thread to Cooper who fought in the Battle of Anchorage. And so I don't know if the writers are doing that little things like that on purpose, but I just love that little tie-in to
I hope
Cooper.
that it is intentional.
Yeah.
That it is intentional and intelligent writing.
Yeah. Yeah. But and then so we flash over to the vault. I love our vaulties. Like
I do
they
too.
steal the show. Chet is literally trying to rattle something in front of the baby. He does not give a shit about Vault 32. He just wants to like sit in his little apartment thing and just pretend that everything is as it should be. Like that's it.
Mhm. And like felt, I get that. Like
Yeah, right?
bless his heart.
Yeah.
I love him.
I love all of them. Oh my gosh. And then
I do
Norm's just
too. And
like,
like
no.
Woody being so crushed with how the election goes. And like I
I
put up 10 posters.
oh
Like
my gosh, I literally have a note on it that just says like we don't spend a lot of time with these vaulties on an individual level, but oh my gosh, I was sad for him. And the complexity of these characters is just so good. And it's so like I'm when I we get I even in episode 4, obviously I loved watching Cooper Howard and Lucy together. I loved all of it, but I was not upset transitioning over to the Vaulties. Like that was not bad for me. Like I wasn't like, oh fuck this. Now I have to wait. It's like, no, I was like, okay, Chet and Norman, what are we doing today?
they're so adorable. And like I loved the little detail in the scene where Woody is like mourning that he didn't win the election. And
Caressing
he's
his poster.
talking to that other guy, and the guy says, I ran once, and then that Weevil famine came. You know what they
Yeah.
say, when things look glum, vote 31. And like I absolutely believe that the Vault Tech upper management people, buds, will engineer crises in order to push their naive, indoctrinated breeding stock and working class into voting for them and keeping them in power. And I also don't think it was the Raiders who damaged the water chip necessarily. I think they could have been a convenient cover for Betty to put this engineered crisis in motion to ensure that 31 remains in control of 33 and 32 as well, with the cleaning it up and repopulating it thing, since Hank is like out of pocket.
Well,
And she make sure that 31 stays in control.
yes, I completely agree with that. And again, a lot of these things don't hit you until after you do that rewatch. And it's when it comes to like even the water supply and everything, it's very I totally agree that it's Betty, because it's like you said, what's really great about this writing is that, and Chelsea and I were just talking about this before we started recording, is out of all of the episodes, this seemed to have maybe less intensity, if you will, or whatever. But this is like a natural progression in terms of pacing. You have to be able to take a breath, you have to be able to react. But the information that we find out in this episode is so important. And what you mentioned about Dave, I think his name's Davey running, or Dave running beforehand, and it's like the whole that famine. And then you have a lot of these things that it's just super convenient, but it's so interesting because they're they have to keep the cover. So it has to seem like a democracy. It has to seem like people are putting in the vote, but you have that catchphrase. You have a lot of these things that's already messing with people's minds, and they're like sheep. They're like, we're just going to follow. We're not going to ask questions. And I
Right.
just think that that's really interesting, because when we flash over to Max and Lucy, and she's like, oh, I am a vault dweller, and Max says, oh, we heard that there were monsters in the vaults. Again, another setup for Vault 4, which is where they end up at the end of this episode. And so I just think that he gets her help, she gets him out, and he's just gonna leave her there. Like, he's kind of done. He's like, okay, have a good day. And she's the one who calls him back. And I just found that very interesting that Max was, willing. Again, it's more, and I to a degree I understand, like, he needs to get that head, he needs to get Thaddeus back, because he knows he's fucked if he doesn't.
Yeah.
So, but I think that Lucy, after dealing with Cooper, is so desperate to find someone she can trust. And I feel like I was so proud of her for not trusting him right away. But then the second that he did something nice, now all of a sudden she's all in again. She's not quite learning her lesson yet, and she's willing to believe things at face value, which is so funny because she was giving Max a hard time about, like, the history or something like that, right? Like, she's kind of made it seem like
giving him a hard time about the Brotherhood and how the Brotherhood functions, and like how they collect pre-war technology and all of this stuff to keep people from having pre-war technology. And like, you can kind of see Maximus realizing now like how weird that is, and like she's giving him crap about that. And then as they move into Shady Sands and she sees the billboard and realizes that there were 34,000 people living there after the war, while
yeah,
she and her people were in the vaults. And like, you can just see like her having her little meltdown about Reclamation Day and like all of the bullshit that the people in the vaults have been fed by the upper management and buds for all of these years.
right.
And she's just like taking these lumps and like, what the fuck? What, like, she's having to reparse everything she knows about the world right now.
Oh, yeah. And I think that it's funny because in this episode, she does kind of come across a little bit arrogant. Like, she almost looks down on Max and is like, oh, well, this is not how it was. This is how it was. Like, she kind of knows because she's a history teacher and she, is doing this. And I just thought that it was interesting because when she is talking to Max about the Brotherhood, he doesn't ask questions. He's very much like, in terms of like what the Brotherhood represents, like, he didn't even think to ask questions about what they're doing. And it's funny, and as much as like, it's very similar to Lucy, who is giving Max shit, but she's not asking questions at the vault either, not the way that Norman is. And I feel like, I don't think she's the lesson, like, to me, okay, you could come at me and be like, okay, well, Heather, isn't that a mirror? And it's like, no. They're going through the same storyline. They're not going to teach each other anything. They're on the same trajectory. But the difference is Lucy's going to go up. And if Chelsea's correct, Max is going to go down. And we're going to see that. And so I think that this is why Max wasn't in the last episode, but this is also why Cooper wasn't in this episode, because I think that they really wanted to focus on Max and even the information that is told, but also how Lucy is responsive to her time with Cooper and to her time with Max. They're doing a really good job at making sure that both males are are so different. And if Lucy doesn't figure everything out, she could end up like Max in that if you're not asking questions, or if you are completely devoted to who you think is the right thing, then you're going to end up a villain in the story. It's like that meme, like, are we the baddies? Like, yeah, you're the baddies.
Well, I think what it is if she ends up being shipped with Cooper, she is going to have a dynamic arc. She's going to change. Whereas if she and Max get together and end up being a ship, it's going to be a static arc and they're not going to change.
Yeah, I completely agree. And if we wanted to hypothetically speak, okay, take off our shipper glasses and just say, okay, Max and Lucy convince me to ship them. I don't know what you would be able to convince me with, except that, okay, they're both innocents who are trying to figure out who they are and what their role is in the wasteland. And that's great. But I don't really see a dynamic between them. And forget for a second about actors and chemistry, because Walton Goggins just has chemistry with everybody, I feel like. And it's not his fault. It's not anybody's fault. But the story is much more compelling with Lucy and Cooper being foils of each other versus they're the same character, but they're the same coin with two different sides. And you have, because that's how I feel about Max and Lucy, is that Max, if he makes different choices, could have been Lucy. You know what I mean? And if Lucy was a liar and selfish, could have been Max. And I just find it so fascinating. It's so interesting to me because they're both going to wake up to the real world, and Max is either going to have to embrace it and just, you know, say fuck everything else. Okay, I'm the Brotherhood regardless, or he's going to have to fight against it. And I think that the plot would be way more compelling if he embraces it and he's just like, all right, I guess this is who I'm going to be. And if this is who I have to be, then I'm going to be it, you know?
I want to see him be like the baddest bitch. Like, I really want to see him take that ambition that we have seen over and over and over again in him and step the fuck into it and just become a badass motherfucker and like rise through the ranks and like go to the top.
Oh yeah, especially because and again, this is why I feel like we go back and forth with Max so much, is you have that hesitation or you have those choices that seem good at first, but then you actually peel back the layers and they're not so good. I want Max to grow in the span of, he's not even hesitating. He doesn't care how this looks. He's going to be the asshole. He's going to do what needs to be done. And I found it really, really interesting because Lucy's father is essentially responsible for Max too, because Max survived Shady Sands. And you could say Hank is also, well, potentially, well, Hank both pre-war did not have power the way that Barb did. So I don't know if we could necessarily blame Hank, even if he was in support of what happened during Cooper's time, but he definitely was responsible for Shady Sands. And so when, I was going to say Ella, when Lucy finds out about this in episode 8, I think it's going to really hit her that her dad is responsible for a lot of what's going on up here. And she is going to feel that responsibility of how can I fix it, or how can I make it, you know, better, because that's just who she is as a, you know, as a character. But let's talk about, okay, obviously Betty gets elected as overseer. No one is surprised by this at all. But then let's get to the part where they do like the fiends. So why don't you tell us about that? Because that was really funny. I liked that scene.
I loved that moment. Like, that was,
what the fuck are you talking about?
There was like, there was so much cute in this. And like, I love how horrified Lucy is that like when the fiends ask, are you armed? Like, with no hesitation at all.
Yeah.
Max lies and says no. And she's like, the fuck, we are.
Yeah. Because I feel like if that's Cooper, he's like, I'm fucking armed, and if you're not careful, I'm gonna fucking kill you before you even realize it. I don't
Yeah.
think Lucy knows that that's how he's gonna be, but like, I think that we know that, again, it's that contrast of who Cooper is. Like, Cooper's gonna tell you exactly what to expect from him, whereas Max is like, and I get, the thing is, I completely backed Max 100%. Like, whether you lie or not, you have to be, you can't trust shit like that. Like, so I get why he lied. I'm fine with why he lied.
I,
But it's like you said, he did it without hesitating. He did it without, it was like slick. Like, he was really slick about
Mhm.
it. So,
It
and
was
I,
smooth. And then I love how Lucy is in this situation.
oh
And
yeah.
like, we take a deep breath. Fuck are you talking about? Like, I love how
Well,
these people on the surface are just like, what even are you?
yeah, which is funny because it's like she does not feel that way about Cooper. Like, and you would think that someone like her would do that, but everyone is looking at her like she's the weird one. Um, and I love that she didn't give Max the gun. Like, she trusts him, she wants to trust him so bad, but something is not
But she
letting
kept
her.
her gun on her
Yeah,
hip. I
she
loved that.
yeah, and I just thought that that was really, really interesting. And I think that part of this again is that response to Cooper of like he literally had her dragging her across the wasteland. So this is her way to be more in control, to kind of protect herself. And so in that way, she is learning the lessons that Cooper was trying to teach her, but you also have some of her former self like going all in with Max and stuff, like wanting so badly to believe that he is going to help me get the head, and we're going to go back to the brotherhood, and he's going to help my dad. Like, she wants to believe it, but she doesn't trust him enough to give him the gun. And I find that so
Well,
interesting.
and like she wants to believe that like if we all put our hands up, this situation's gonna turn out fine. Like,
Right. Well, and it's interesting because she was giving Max such a hard time about the brotherhood and not asking questions. And yet she's over here thinking, oh, yeah, it's just going to go exactly how I expect. No one's going to get hurt. And it's like, this is you now being a hypocrite. Like, I love you, Lucy, you're my girl, but like, this is a critical thinking moment and you are not critically thinking. And I think it's her so desperately wanting to prove that Cooper is wrong, that like you.
that there are good people up here, and if we just act the way that they tell us we should act in the vault, and if we are good people, other people will be good people to us. The golden rule is going to work for me in this situation. And like she tries to apply her golden rule, and like she gets fucked and like almost gets killed.
Yeah.
And like Max acting quickly on her behalf and like pulling that gun off her hip and killing the fiends is what saves her ass. And
Oh,
like
yeah.
to him for that, by the way.
Oh, yeah, exactly. And I'm like, and not only that, he gets shot because of her, because
Yeah.
of the choices that she makes. And again, it almost reflects. Now, granted, the gulper and the bag, I wouldn't necessarily classify as Lucy's fault. She's just doing what she has to do to survive. But specifically in this instance, that is on Lucy for not, I mean, I'm fine with her not giving him the gun but for not being more suspicious of just even having the gun out just to be on the safe side, because we know she's a great shot already from episode 1, but even how she took out those rad roaches, like she's going to be more effective just being ready. And
Just like instead of moving across the bridge with your hands up, why couldn't you all just cross the bridge at the same time? But she could have, like, they all said they weren't armed, but she could have had her hand down by the gun
yeah,
and the holster to be more prepared in case some shit went sideways. Like,
right.
might just be paranoid, but like I would have had my hand by that gun just in case.
Right. Well, and she has to understand that between the two of them, she is the one with the weapon. Max doesn't have it. So she's responsible for both of them. She's the one who wanted to make this deal. Max wanted to go off on his own. Now she's kind of dragging Max to do like what she wants. And it's like, you can't do that. You have to understand like where Max is coming from, whether you agree with it or not. It's like, and now guess what? There's a consequence. He is now shot. And I think that that is a lesson. Like, even like after he shoots both of them and she turns to him and is like, what? Like, why is this happening? And I just wanted to be like, girl, like, what did you expect? Would you have been fine with you getting shot or with Max dying? Or like, what did you think was going to happen? And I think this is necessary for her because it's not just Cooper being an asshole. It's no, like, this, he
It's the
is
growing
right.
pains of the wasteland. Like, this is what happens up here. And like, I love that, you know, he has to explain to her what fiends are and they're people that eat people. And she has that I hate it up here moment.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
after everything you just went through at the super duper mark, you should have been prepared for this.
yeah.
Like, I know you had your whole little self-righteous golden rule motherfucker moment, but like, everything that just happened to you in the previous episode should have prepared you for something like this.
Yeah, and I do think to a degree she's not super trustworthy right away, but I think that like to be like, I just think that she should have known better at that point. And I think the reason she doesn't is she so desperately wants to believe in that golden rule, and it kind of bites her in the ass, and the consequence is someone got hurt because of her. And I think that that's going to be a really hard lesson for her to learn, because not only is Max hurt, but it's like, oh fuck, Cooper's right. It's not just him being some like terrible person. It's he's this way because of this. And again, it's that cause and effect. And so, okay, I love, so we go back to the Vaulties. I love how like Norm and Shet are talking, and Shet's like, I just want to stay here. And Norm's like, da da da, no, this is what's going on. And then all of a sudden we see Steph come out. And
Yeah. She
oh,
scares the shit out
dude,
of
I
me.
literally have a note. Like,
I
I want to know about Steph, because when Norm starts asking about Vault 31 and she's like, I don't know, what did your dad say? And it's like, she doesn't even flinch. She doesn't like narrow her eyes. She's not
She
like Betty where
doesn't
she,
blink. She
no,
doesn't bat an eyelash. Her breathing
no.
doesn't change. That bitch has the best poker face I've ever seen in my life.
Even better than Betty at times, because with Betty, she kind of is like, why are you asking these things? And it's like, Steph doesn't even question it. She just goes along, and she's all like, well, what did your dad say?
And
I
she's
was
got
like,
the ass
bitch,
smile and
I
she's
know.
calm. And I'm just like, oh, she scares me.
And I'm like, okay, what is Steph? Like, what is going on here? Because especially after that little interaction with Norm in the previous episode where she talks about her husband, I'm like, are you pro Vault 31 or not? But then after, after obviously, well, actually, why don't we go into Max's line that you really like?
Yes, yes. Let me scroll to my notes.
So they're going to Shady Sands, and Lucy doesn't get it. And I know we already touched on this a little bit, but she finds out that Shady Sands was destroyed not in the war, but afterwards.
Afterwards. And
And
she
this is,
asked what happened. And, you know, Max says the same thing that always happens. Everyone wants to save the world. They disagree on how. And that is so fucking powerful and like so apropos.
100%, because it almost feels like a setup of what the show is going to be. Everyone wants to save the wasteland, or everyone wants to save the people in the wasteland, and everybody disagrees on how. Vault-Tec or the Vaulties at this point disagree with the Brotherhood, who disagrees with even the citizens, the people who make up the wasteland, and
Right. The NCR and
all of that. And I am just, and even Max's line right there, I just feel it's so poignant that out of all of the characters, it's him that says it. And I feel like it's almost like a hint of who he is as a character, because it's like, again, it's that Max wants to do the right thing, but the way he goes about it is not the
so
right way. Yeah. And then, we get a little flashback of well, Max, survived. Obviously, he's in that fridge. Um, but another lie that he tells her is that the just a graze, it was just a graze, is a lie. And
Right.
it's like, actually, no, it's not. He is suffering because of this gunshot that, again, Lucy is responsible for. And to a degree, I could a little bit understand why he's lying about this. He wants to seem tough. He doesn't want to slow down. They have to get to this head. But again, it's another lie. And so it's like these things start building up. Um, and so they go to a medical center that they see, which I think is very interesting because obviously Lucy and Cooper had gone to a medical center, where Raj was. And what was very interesting is like Max just like sits there and watches her go in and disappear, and he has to like think about it before he follows her into
Right.
this building. I'm like, dude, like, why aren't you running after the girl? Like, aren't you supposed to be her knight in shining armor? Like,
Right.
I don't know. I just thought that was really like another interesting choice that Max makes, that he waits. And I think that that hesitation is very poignant in who he is as a character, of like, you're at least in my opinion, like, if Lucy's running into something, Cooper is on her ass yelling at her the whole time, like, you fucking faulty, like, you idiot, like, you whatever. Max just watches her like go in, and it's almost like he has to like,
He hisses her name at her, but it is not, it's very like quiet and reserved and like shit.
yeah.
Not like, it's not loud.
No. And I just think that like it's one thing if you're like, oh fuck, and you run after her, but there was a pretty decent amount of time where like by the time Max gets in there, Lucy is gone. Like you have no idea where she is.
Right.
And I just thought that that was really interesting. I think that it's really like it was really cool watching the lights kind of flicker, almost like this like arrow leading him. And obviously, if there are lights, that's electricity. So some kind of generator is running. And again, I think this goes back to my theory of this episode being completely Max. We're not following Lucy in there. We're seeing this building through Max's point of view. We're seeing everything that's not Vault Tech related through Max's point of view. This is a Max episode right here. Um, and so I just think that that was really interesting. And then of course we flash back, and what does Betty do?
Like Betty comes over the PA system and does this little announcement about we're gonna repopulate Vault 32. And then you see Chet and Norm, and like Chet is having like a whole freak out moment of what is going on.
My baby.
He's so precious. I love him. And like I love how cool and collected Norm
Oh
is,
yeah.
by the way. Like I love
He's
that. I think it's brilliant.
he's such a badass when he goes up to Betty and he's like, good clean job, or good job cleaning up.
I thought that was brilliant. And I loved their little exchange about his mom's Pit Boy too.
Oh
That was
yeah.
brilliant.
Oh yeah. And I just think that it was really cool. Like, and she doesn't like, you kind of see that again, that little bit of hesitation, and then she's all like, "Oh yeah, like we had to clean up the mess the Raiders made." And I'm like, dude, it's scary how convincing she is. Like, it's
Right. And
scary.
I love that like she shot a hole through that computer, that he had looked up all that information on her and Vault 31 and Vault 32 on. Like, because that computer was fucking functional the night before.
Yep, absolutely.
I love
And
that.
well, and it's interesting because like when I'm doing the rewatch and I'm watching Steph, I'm like, okay, what side are you on, Steph? But then I was like, oh wait, no, no, no. Steph is obviously wanting this because she gets to be overseer of 32, right? Like I can't
Yeah,
is
that's
that what happened?
absolutely gonna happen.
Yeah.
I Even if we don't see it happen in this season, I don't remember if we do or
I
not, but
don't
like
remember either.
obviously gonna happen. Like that
Yeah.
is straight up like going to happen. If it didn't, I would be stunned.
Well, I don't think anyone else is from Vault 31 as far as we know.
Right.
And so as Betty really can only trust Steph, and that
Like,
makes me very curious who Steph was pre-war.
Me
Um,
too. I have like a really weird crack theory about who Steph might have been pre-war.
tell me.
I don't know where I pulled this from, but like, you know, in the scene where they have the round table in the room with Rob Coe and everybody else,
Yeah.
and then Barb gets orders on her Pip Boy, and she looks up and sees a shadowy figure in the room above, and it's obviously a male figure.
Oh yeah, okay.
I believe that Steph is in some way connected to that shadowy figure,
Mm-hmm.
like either daughter, wife, sister, in some way connected to the shadowy figure that was giving Barb orders in
Yeah.
that room in the meeting with at Vaultec.
Yeah. I could see that for sure.
That's my theory.
That'll be interesting. I think Steph's a very intriguing character.
She is.
Um, and so yeah, again, what you said with Betty alluding to essentially, killing killing
Right.
Rose. Yeah. And then, it flashes back to Max and Lucy, and they're it's almost disturbing. They're both on gurneys unconscious until I think Max wakes up first, right? I
I
can't
think
remember.
I I don't remember which of them wakes up first.
Well, they both wake up, and Max is like, "Where are we?" And she's like, "We're in the best place in the world." And that right there tells
I'm
me,
like, you're not learning,
I know,
baby.
that's what I said. I was like, okay, and this makes sense because she had her midpoint reversal, but she's still in denial. She's much more okay. So if we break this up the way that a story structure would be, like you have your act one, you have the setup, but they're resisting that call to action until they're usually forced into that call of action. And then when they are in this new world, it's sort of like they're learning it. So they're passive. They're not like life is happening to them. Literally, Lucy's getting dragged around by Cooper. But now, after her midpoint reversal, she's much more active in, okay, I'm going to make a deal. I'm going to save Max. I'm going to do this. We're not going to shoot these fiends, blah, 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 blah. But just because you're being more active doesn't mean you have completely learned the lessons that you need to learn. And it's not going to hit you until you get that black moment, essentially, or, the what are other things that you normally would call it? Like, gosh, like something about the living soul or whatever, like, you
Uh,
know what I mean?
the Dark Night of the Soul.
The dark night of the soul. Yeah. And so it's like she's going to have to learn her lesson the hard way. And it's not going to be fun, but it's definitely necessary. Um, and I feel like, I think she's still in denial that the vaults are bad,
Yeah.
and I think at this point, she still thinks that she's going to go back into a vault after she finds her dad. And this is why, I mean, and we'll talk about it. I can't remember if it's episode 6 or 7, but essentially she's like to Max, we're going to go to my vault and we're going to, implying that they're going to marry and just be safe together in this vault. And then a bunch of shit's going to happen. And clearly that's not going to be that end game. But yeah, I mean, so any final thoughts on the episode, Chelsea?
Mm-mm. I think we wrapped it all up pretty well.
Yeah, I think it was very like again doing this rewatch, I picked up so many more things, and just even the fact that it's a Max episode versus, anybody else. I think I think that just goes to your crack theory of Max being a villain, because
Right.
I can't remember even Cooper having an entire episode just to himself, right?
Right.
Because and I think that posits Lucy and Cooper when they have an episode together, you'll go back and forth between them. But Max got this whole episode on his own, and I think that's really telling. And I mean, I'm just glad we saw Thaddeus. I'm glad we saw our Volties. Like even though it was a slower episode, I still really enjoyed it. And even though it didn't have Goggins in it, I think it's still an enjoyable episode.
Absolutely. And like I feel like it told us a lot, even though it was a reactionary episode.
Yeah.
Like we got a lot of information in this episode.
Yeah, important information. And again, those setups and payoffs are just chef's kiss. And because we see a lot of those setups and payoffs, that's telling me that this whole thing between Lucy and Cooper has to be going somewhere. And I don't think that they would red herring that. I don't think that they would do it without like some reason, because
Right.
everything
I don't
else,
think that they would bait and switch us like that. Like
like,
I should hope not anyway.
well, even to a degree, if you want to look at something so innocuous like the chicken fucker, he comes back and he plays a really critical role in the next couple of episodes. And so it's like just an offhanded joke that was made early on. All of a sudden, no, like again, it's that setup and payoff. And I'm just thinking the way the detail that they did it with Lucy and Cooper, and even what they're doing with Max and just the choices that he's making and why he's making those choices, I think it's just
Too
too
intentional.
yeah, intentional is a great word for that. So, all right, Chelsea, what should they comment? What comment should we have them leave for us?
Hmm. Do you think that Betty is the one who rat poisoned the prisoners or not?
And if not, who do you think did it?
Yes, exactly.
So, all right, that's it for episode 5. We're so excited. Join us next time for episode 6. If you're enjoying hanging out with us, like, subscribe. Like, we love interacting with you guys on socials and just come and talk. We love talking Ghoulsy. We have decided that we're going to be doing Fanfic Friday, and whenever we can, we're going to be interviewing Ghoulsy fanfic authors and just talking about crack theories, season 2 potential stuff, head canons, and it's just been so much fun, and we'd love you guys to be part of it. So just subscribe and leave us a comment. We're like pretty fun people, so
We
yeah.
are, and so are you guys. Like you
Yeah.
guys are amazing, and like I know I am like a chaotic goblin, but I feel like we're all here for that energy. So please come hang out with me. Like
Yeah.
just hang out with me.
She's really fun. We're both really fun.
We
And
are.
there's remember the rules of our podcast. No judgment. No judgment. So say whatever you need to say. Like we're here for it.
Yes.
Well, we will see you next time. It was great hanging with you guys. Take care. Bye.
Bye.